Hello and welcome to the fourth episode of the Aloe and Ace podcast. I am the Allosexual Skylar.
And I'm the Asexual Jesse. You were making me laugh when the music was going.
That's not my problem. I'm like, why are you laughing at me for being allosexual?
Oh, yeah. Yep, that's what I was doing.
All right. So we like to give a few warnings in the beginning. First off, this episode will contain mild discussion about SA. And also, this is a sexual-based podcast about sexuality, so we do discuss sex.
Yes.
If this is your first time tuning in, then stop what you're doing and start with the first episode. The first and second episode gives you a history of us. The third one goes into...
I would say tips.
Yeah.
There's some tips in there, I'd say, that you can take.
Yeah, some good quotes and learning about respect and bridges and boundaries and all that.
Right, boundaries.
This episode is going to discuss fears.
Yeah, and I will be honest in saying I've been a bit nervous to do this episode because I feel like this is pretty much as deep as it can get with peeling back layers and being vulnerable.
Yeah. So it should be a good episode. One thing to note is that you can find us on most platforms for socials, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, which we haven't posted anything on there yet, TikTok, Tumblr, Twitter. And so if you are interested in following along, that would be awesome. We love interacting with people and we love your messages.
Yes, so please keep sending them.
If you feel like sending us an email, you can do so at aloeandacepodcast@gmail.com.
We really try hard to make sure that we are responsive because we truly do enjoy communicating with all of you.
I do have one call of action right now. After you listen to this episode, there is a poll that is on the episode for Spotify, and we want to know more about you. So there will be options like whether you're the allosexual, whether you're the asexual, if you listen to it as a couple, also if you're single or in a relationship.
Yeah, so I think it'd be pretty interesting to see what our listenership looks like in those ways.
Alrighty, so let's dig into this episode on fear. Now, as I have communicated in some of the forums and some of the groups, there are some allosexual people that are maybe concerned that I don't have enough experience with understanding how it is to be in a relationship with an asexual person.
Yeah, and what's interesting to kind of dissect a bit is that you haven't had anybody really questioning you from the asexual side. It's just been allosexuals, right?
Right.
Fascinating.
Yeah. So I do want to give some background to hopefully maybe give a little bit more of a pedigree chart, I guess, on my emotions and feelings.
Yeah, Skylar's being called out a bit in certain areas or certain places of communication from people that don't know him. And so it's just been really interesting to hear some of the comments and then be like, whoa, wait a second. Let's give some more context here. So we have given more context in those areas, but we thought it would be best to do that here as well for our listeners.
And by me doing this, it actually ties directly into my initial fears I had. So between the two marriages that I've been in, I have 18 years of feeling not good enough sexually or not satisfied with maybe the expectancy that I had with intimacy and sex.
Right. You had a feeling of lack. There was a lack.
Because I'm a very high libido sexual person, and in both marriages, it wasn't what I was hoping for, I guess. And the interesting thing is, I can understand maybe my previous marriage where my relationship wasn't great, in my opinion, which is why I'm no longer in that relationship. And I felt like I wasn't good enough. I felt like I was the problem. I understand that I probably wasn't as emotionally available as I should have or could have been, but our core personalities did not align. And so when I chose to leave that first marriage, which involved children, involved a mortgage, involved a lot of things,
Involved a whole life.
a whole life of 13 years to decide this isn't the type of relationship that I deserve to be in.
And frankly, she deserves a life with somebody that can fully appreciate her and what she has to offer as well.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So there's some interesting, the reason why I bring that up is because a lot of people who are in these allosexual, asexual relationships, they don't have experience with the difficulty of leaving a relationship. And so I've made that decision once before.
You mean leaving a very settled marriage?
Yes.
Okay.
Where there's children involved, where there's mortgages, retirements.
Are you getting that sense from what we've seen now?
It's more so just like I've had to make hard decisions.
Right. But what I'm saying is you're getting that feeling that a lot of ace-allo relationships, they haven't ended in that way based off of what you've been seeing in the community.
Yeah.
Okay.
So either they're very new relationships or they're very established relationships.
Very old relationships. Like we're talking 20 plus years
20,
at least.
30 years.
Right. And they're hanging on. They're
Yeah.
hanging on. Right. Okay.
So I get into a new relationship with Jesse, and it's night and day difference as far as the compatibility, the core personalities that match. And so surely the sex will be there.
Right. And we did briefly touch on this in the last episode, I think.
Yes.
Yeah.
So then there's not, right? And so I have 18 years of filling that void sexually in a sense. And not only that, but I understand what it's like to have that, feeling that brokenness, feeling undesirable, feeling like you're not good enough sexually, maybe for your partner, that you're inadequate.
You felt ugly, didn't you?
I felt like my body hair was disgusting, other things like that. And so in previous episode, we discussed the dabbling with other people.
Yeah,
So,
with ethical non-monogamy.
and this was in part to have Jessie figure out what was her blockers.
Right. I was truly trying to fix myself by taking it to an extreme, which does sound like me. That's how I work. I'm very black and white. And if I'm scared of something, then I will dive head first into it at some point when I can't stand it anymore and go for it. And that's exactly what I did. And it sucks. It sucks to have gone to the deep end like that to fix myself. I'm doing quotation marks and you can't see it. But it is what we did.
And in doing so, I found out what it is like to be sexually attractive to somebody.
Right. And you've also felt that at a younger age as well, right?
Yeah. And so the interesting thing is that I had that lack, and then I didn't have that lack, but then I also chose to not continue in that E&M type of situation.
And what made you feel confident in not wanting to continue in that situation?
Because when Jessie came out as asexual, when she had that grand aha moment,
Which was not long after we decided to stop dabbling.
yeah, it was me understanding that what it comes down to is my relationship with Jessie, the soul bonded, soulmate, twin flame type relationship that we have, isn't worth spending time away from her and understanding that the type of relationship that I want to have with her is strictly with her. I am not polyamorous. I don't want to divide my time. I don't want to do anything like that. And to know that Jesse was in such a hard space with sexuality and identity, it's not something that needed to continue because I could then feel sexually wanted.
Right. And that's honestly and always to say that ethical non-monogamy does work for some people. We love all of our friends that do practice ethical non-monogamy and do believe in it, and we think that's great for them. But it does not work for everybody.
And I'm sure that we'll do a episode down the road on ethical non-monogamy as well.
We will. We definitely will.
One thing that I wanted to say is that there are a lot of valid reasons for someone, especially allosexual, who has these fears or these understandings about themselves of why they feel an importance for being sexually desired. There's people who have experienced trauma or have experienced issues with their parents or with religion. And so then when you get with your partner and you're like, now is the time for me to be sexually desired and wanted and have this person really just want to come at me, and then you don't, that can really mess with you. And so that is something that is valid.
So your old fear, because we're going to get into your now fear, but your old fear up 9 months ago and before, yeah, was a very typical fear for an allosexual, which is I am going to have no sex ever again or a lack of sex, and it's like always that wanting feeling.
Yeah, and I do want to say, sexless, quote unquote, sexless marriages aren't unique to allosexual, asexual relationships. It's probably one of the number one reasons that regular, quote unquote, regular couples fight. And we say regular with that just means anyone who's not in an asexual relationship. Like whatever that looks like to you, whether that's lesbian, gay, non-binary.
Two sexual people in a relationship. It's still a big issue going on. It is
still a big issue.
Yeah.
But we understand that in an asexual relationship, and that's what I call it because I am in an asexual relationship. In an asexual relationship, it seems to be magnified.
Yeah, definitely.
And so there's this real fear as an allosexual in an asexual relationship that I will never have sex again, that I have to be in this sexless marriage.
You will never be desired ever again.
I will never be desired, and that's what I want. And I want to say that sex is a very powerful thing. Like it has built kingdoms. It has also toppled kingdoms. It is something that is very beautiful and something that can be very painful. It is something that is used to get what you want. It is also something that is taken. There is a lot of dynamics when it comes to sex. It is not this black and white thing. It is such a large, complex, scary, beautiful, fearful issue.
Right.
And so my fear of never having sex again is not what my current fear is.
Yeah.
And I can say that the reason for possibly me changing what my fear is because of my acceptance of Jesse's asexuality.
Well, anything other than acceptance of it is that feels terrible. And honestly.
And we understand that not everybody can get on the same page as me or us, or these thoughts, or these suggestions.
And wait, and if you can't, that's fine. But honestly, do yourself a favor and your asexual partner a favor and get out of it, because there is so much harm being done if you know that you're not going to be able to do that. I'm sorry, but there's so much pain here.
And we're not saying to not find ways to stay or to try or to work on it.
Right.
But if your ultimate thing is that I don't believe that my partner is asexual, and
I can change them.
And also I can change them, and that I am demanding that they have sex with me when they don't want to, or forcing them into
ethical non-monogamy.
Ethical,
yeah. At that point, it wouldn't be ethical, right? If you're forcing someone to do it.
Yeah. And there might be some people that if they listen to this, they might feel called out. And I'm not calling out anyone. We hear about this all the time on Reddit, on YouTube, on Instagram.
On all the things.
It's not specific to any group that I'm in.
In those cases, you need to release yourself from the relationship, and you need to respect the other person involved, the asexual involved. You need to release them from the relationship too. It's so sad.
We are hoping that we can be a beacon of hope. We are hoping that we can provide things that are relatable.
Yeah.
If anything, we're hoping that you can talk about it with your partners. One of the things with fear is that you need to give it a name. Because you might not fully understand the reason for the fear until you give it a name. For instance, I am afraid that I'm never going to have sex again in my marriage. Well, what is the actual fear? I'm afraid that my partner won't sexually desire me. Well, let's break it down further. Why do I fear about sexual desire? I fear that I am ugly. I fear that I lack self-worth.
Or how about, I fear that all of the other things about me aren't good enough, and this is the only thing that I can provide.
Yeah.
Oof.
So give fear a name. And the thing is that we talked about in episode 3 about build that bridge of respect when it comes to boundaries. There are a lot of people that have reached out to us who have not even talked to their partner about themselves being asexual. There's people who have reached out as allosexuals that have their own sets of fears that they haven't talked to their partners about.
There are people that are allosexuals that have thought that their partner is asexual, but haven't talked to them about it and are labeling them as asexual before the person that is asexual possibly has even talked about it.
And we're never going to give any names or any specifics when it comes to like things that people reach out about.
Yeah.
The point of that, us saying that, is that until you are able to label your fears and also build on your relationship with communication to be able to discuss those fears, then it's almost going to be a trauma dump session that is not going to go well with your partner.
Yeah, I agree.
And so for me, I have turned what I thought my expectancy was for intimacy, and I took the hierarchy away. So we had the discussion about me giving names to intimacy, like the parking lot at Disneyland versus being on the ride.
Yeah.
So there was always this hierarchy of what intimacy was to me. Being sex is the grand ending finale of intimacy.
It is the highest form that you can have.
I don't have that anymore because I have been able to look at the boundaries that Jessie has set for herself that are healthy. And I have looked at the bridge of respect that I have built to that by acknowledging that she is asexual and sex repulsed. Now, that's not everybody. There are sex favorable asexuals that will be like, hey, if you want to,
I'm down.
I'm down.
Yep.
That is not Jesse.
Nope.
So there is a real fear, quote unquote fear.
Or there could be a real fear.
There could be a real fear that sex doesn't happen ever again. And I've looked at all of the intimacy that we do, which we talked about in the 3rd episode, and I no longer have a hierarchy for any of it. It's all equal. And that's how I'm able to touch her nightly in the way that I do without it being disappointing, without me longing or wanting other things to happen, or hope that, hey, if I touch her like this enough that she might somehow get turned on and be like, all right, let's do something. Holding hands to me is just as powerful, if not more powerful, than sex itself. Because I know without a shadow of doubt that Jesse does not have any fears or feelings of worriness when it comes to holding hands like she does sex.
Mm-hmm.
And so my fears have changed. I had 18 years of this fear. I had 18 years of feeling unwanted. I had 18 years of feeling undesired and feeling broken, not only from religion, but from previous experiences, to now being able to change that into a different fear. And my fear is that Jesse will not be able to take it and that she will be the one that leaves.
And we want to get more into that after I've kind of explained where my fears are at.
And why that could be a possibility.
Right. Before I get into my fears, I wanted to talk about a question that we received. I'm going to read it now. It says, one item I'd like to ask you about or hoping you will talk about on the podcast is that you mentioned that you do have sex occasionally and it is left to Jesse when and if that happens. Jesse, how do you know when that is really what you want and it's not something else like societal pressure or pressure from outside or something else? And I heard you mention that it might not be that you can say, I want this. Well, then if it's not a want, how do you know you are in a good place mentally for sex? What are the cues? So I want to answer that. And it can be a bit tricky. I'm going to be honest, but I'm going to be honest. Here we go. Usually if I have gotten to a place of initiating sex with Skylar, it's because my body wants to procreate. I feel like that's probably the most legit time that it is initiated. Wouldn't you agree with that?
Yeah, it seems to only happen around ovulation.
Right, which
Since you lost your persona and have come out asexual.
Right.
Or at least owned your asexuality.
Yes. So I kind of just start getting this feeling of, I don't know, that needing to be closeness. Okay. And when I say closeness, I think we all know what I mean. It's an underlying, I don't even feel comfortable saying horniness because I don't even think that's the right word. It's like just this urge to procreate, I guess.
You're not ravenous.
No, I'm not salivating. Sorry, Skylar, but I'm not. So leading up to that, I can start to feel that. And I know that when I start to feel that, I honestly need to give myself days to ask the question to myself in my head, are we wanting to do this today? And I'll be honest, when this is happening, I ask myself this question probably 30 different times each day that this question's being asked. And it sounds exhausting, and that's because it is exhausting. It is an incredible, like, wrap my head around situation. And it is a lot. It's a lot. And so I spend the next several days thinking, am I wanting to do this? No, not yet. Am I wanting to do this? No, not yet. Am I wanting to do this? Maybe. No, not yet. And then finally, after it's been a few days, it's typically like peak of ovulation, I'd say, almost always. And I have this feeling of, okay. It's never, I don't feel like it's ever a feeling of, yeah, let's go. It's just like, okay, I'm in a neutral place for this. And I'm going to look at Skylar and I'm going to choose to say, let's have sex. And that is exactly how it's worded. And I'm very careful with my words because I want to be completely honest when I do initiate this.
Yeah, it's not a let's have sex.
It's very anticlimactic. I turn to him and look at him in bed and say, let's have sex. And so it takes a lot for me to get there. And it's been difficult. It's been difficult to understand how I need to communicate that. I don't have any major cues. I have to sit there and wrap my head around it. And so it is still tricky. I can genuinely say, though, it's never from pressure now. It's never from societal pressure or pressure from Skylar because we have had such clear communication and worked through these boundaries. Up until 9 months ago and older, though, I 100% felt pressure.
When do you think's the last time that you felt pressure from me? And I don't mean like with my jokey vacation talk in July, but like
I know, but that did cause pressure.
I know, but like where I was actually like possibly using getting behaviors.
Okay. I don't think you were using getting behavior when we were on vacation in last July. It did give that feeling though, but that wasn't your intention at all. I would say maybe like a year and a half ago, you stopped with the getting behaviors. I don't know. What would you say?
Probably. I think when we started down the asexual train of journey, if you will, of discovering, demi versus, allo versus ace. Mm-hmm. And we understand that demisexuality is under the ace umbrella. So that's not what I mean by that. I mean more like the idea of my wife still being sexually attracted to me as demisexual.
Right. Yeah. So it's hard. I'm going to say it's tricky, but I also don't think that you should be engaging in it if you are anything that's below indifferent. Like, I just don't think it's a good idea. And this is the perfect question, actually, to segue into my fears. And we've said this before, Skylar and I will always be as transparent as we possibly can be on this podcast because we believe that it will ultimately impact in the best way.
I wanted to touch on that actually.
Oh, okay.
I have a good analogy actually.
Oh, here we go. Oh, do you? Is it?
Podcasting is a lot like doing porn.
Oh, wow. I was not expecting you to say that. Okay, do tell.
Everything that we are saying, the vulnerability that we are putting out there, the information that we are putting out there is out there potentially forever.
And for everyone.
Ooh. So even when I delete this, even if I was to delete this off of Spotify and Apple, it would still be out there on other platforms that just kind of archive stuff.
Yeah.
So we are very open and honest. Our family members, my parents, my mom actually has the podcast name. She can listen to it. Everything that I say.
And this is probably the scariest part to me because I'm like, oh boy, what are we going to get asked? People are learning all these personal things. Our family members that believe in certain things and whatever. It's a lot, but it's all we know how to be.
And we did say this before in the last episode. It's probably something that we should say every episode. But honestly, I think if you're with us to this point, you understand that we are just regular people.
We are.
We don't have degrees in psychology. We're not therapists, and we never claim to be. And we think that if you feel like your mental health is having issues around your sexual identity or your marriage, you should certainly seek a safe therapist.
Right. Yes. We definitely want that. And I think our biggest thing is just helping people feel community, build awareness. And if you happen to get some nuggets of advice from us and they're working for you, that's fantastic.
Yes. So podcasting and porn, it's out there forever.
That's great. That's great, babe. Okay. So like I said, here we go. This is probably the most honest I've been with everyone, everywhere, all at once. I had to do it.
I was going to say it, but I'm like,
So this morning, it was actually one of those mornings that...
Well, yesterday was our anniversary.
Yes, it was.
And if any of you follow our socials, I had made a cartoon, if you will, about two forks and they're sitting in bed eating cake. And I said, as soon as Jessie came out as asexual, I'm the one that actually told her, on our anniversary, we will eat cake.
Yes, and so it just so happened to be better than sex cake.
So that is what we did yesterday. We did have cake.
Yes, and we were at a party with that cake.
Yes.
And I did go around asking, is this better than sex cake? Actually better than sex?
Leave it to the asexual to do that. And everyone's like, are you out of your mind? Of course it's not. There's some people that were like, I mean, it's better than 15% of the sex I've had, but it's certainly not better than sex.
And I was just eating it and I was like, really? It's like, really good.
You're like, I would go after this every time if I had a choice. All right. So now it's the day after our anniversary.
Yes. The day after our anniversary, and I have been working myself up for several days, asking myself, am I ready to have sex? Am I ready to have sex? I'm getting this feeling. Am I ready to have sex?
And there was zero part of me that was expecting it.
Right, exactly. Yeah. It was all me. You didn't even know. Skylar doesn't even know when I'm doing this, okay?
I have a general idea of when she's ovulating, but I have literally zero expectations of sex ever happening. I have told her before that she can tell me it'll never happen again, and she's like, I'm not willing to say that.
Yeah.
And so I don't have any expectation, even when it is around ovulation, to like touch her more or any of that.
Right. And just to give a little bit more background, we haven't been intimate in that way for the last 3 months. Okay. So it's been building a bit. And the reason, some of those reasons, I had surgery that it was a bit rough for me. And I think that played into it a bit, but that doesn't even matter. I'm just saying it's been a few months and I took the time the last few days to be wrapping my head around this. And this morning I asked myself this question and the answer was, okay. So I turned to Skylar and I said, let's have sex.
And I said, okay.
Yep. He said, okay. So.
And then I asked my question I ask every time, which we talked about last episode.
Yep. Which is, where would you like this to go? What is it that you're wanting to do? Are you wanting to just have sex or are you wanting other things to happen? And I clarified with him and I said, I would just like to have sex and that's it.
And I said, all right.
Yeah. So I would be lying if I said I wasn't nervous at all. And some of this nervousness was because I haven't done this in the last 3 months and I haven't done it since having surgery. And I was just a bit nervous. But I said, let's go, I'm going to go for this. So we begin and I don't know, I'd say within 2 minutes of this starting, I'm like, oh no, I am feeling kind of emotional. Oh no, what's going to happen? And
I will admit that I thought maybe I had felt some teariness before there was more tears.
Right, yes.
But I wasn't 100% sure.
Yeah. So I start fighting back, like these tears.
And I think I asked, is everything okay? And you said yes.
I said, let's keep going. Which is like me, unfortunately and fortunately. So I just had all this, the weight of the world come down on me with this feeling of he's enjoying this so much and I can tell. And I am just not going to ever be able to enjoy it in the same way that he is. I'm not going to ever be able to give this to him in the way that he so badly wishes I could. And this is my own story, you know. He's not saying anything to feed it. And then it just kind of started spiraling from there. I wasn't full-blown crying yet. I had tears streaming down my face, and he had put his face on my face as like, he didn't know yet I was completely crying, and I think you felt the tears.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so then I said, just give me a minute. So he sat there on top of me, and I just started having a panic attack in the middle of it. And it's like these mini panic attacks. They only last a few minutes, but I can tell that they're happening because my breathing drastically changes. It's like this crying breathing, like, and then it just all just releases. My tears are just flowing. And I'm just like, wow, this is terrible. And I'm never going to be able to have the kind of sex that he wants. And he's having this connection with me, but I am like, no one's home. No one's home. The lights are all on for him and no one is home. It feels silent in the worst way possible in my head. And then also this feeling of, I'm so boring. Poor Skylar, I'm so boring. What am I going to do about this? What am I going to do? And at this point, I couldn't continue. I feel like I mentioned something else though. Do you remember the other thing I mentioned? Because Skylar asked me, he's like, what's going through your head? What's going on? What are you thinking? I feel like there were 3 things I mentioned. I said, I feel like I'm not ever going to be able to do this with you in the same way that you want it. And then I also said, I feel boring. I can't seem to put my finger on that 3rd thing. I mean, I was pretty emotional. It was really sad.
Yeah, it was a full-blown cry. Like your eyes were puffy.
Yeah.
Most of the day after.
Yep. And I was trying to calm down. And I'm like, even telling this story right now feels so scary and so vulnerable.
And I do want to say, like, all of the things that she said was in her mind and what she was thinking. I was actually very trepidatious. Is that a word?
You had trepidation.
I had trepidation. It had been, 3 months. I knew it was probably going to be something very possibly emotional. Mm-hmm. So I wasn't actually showing a ton of excitement, or I wasn't like, oh yeah, finally, like,
Right.
I was being, I was kind of walking on eggshells with sex because I knew that there could possibly be some issues around it.
I think the best way to put it is you were being sensitive.
I was being sensitive,
with me.
Because a lot of times people use like walking on eggshells as like, you got to walk on eggshells.
Yeah,
around them.
I'm not sure I'm a big fan of that.
So because I knew that there were these healthy boundaries and I respect her, I was being sensitive to the situation. I would actually ask her like, hey, do you want me to do this? And she's like, yeah, you can do that. You do want me to do this? Yes, you can do that. I was asking consent all along the way of even where I touched or where I kissed or where I licked or where I did anything. because I didn't want her to just like, I didn't want to just assume something and then just have her like be like, holy shit. Like I wasn't expecting that. So everything that happened was already like said.
Yeah. So I think I remember what the other thing was, and it was that I just felt so disappointed in myself because I'm sitting here. The last thing Skylar wants to be seeing is having me have a panic attack literally while he's inside of me. Sorry to be graphic, but there it is. And I'm just like, you worked so hard over the last few days to question this and get to where you were just to break down and have to stop. Oh my gosh, like get it together, you know? And he was nothing but sweet, of course, and kind and thoughtful and sensitive. And so this leads into these fears, right? Oh, I know the other thing. I thought I had it, but that was one. So I guess there were 4 things. The biggest one is that every time we have been intimate since coming out as asexual, it just solidifies my asexuality. It cements it in. And I am still learning to embrace it. And so when we're being intimate, it's a huge light of like, oh girl, you definitely asexual. Okay. And I'm having a hard time with that. Some days I don't. Some days I'm like, yeah, asexuality. Right. Yeah, this is awesome. And then other days it is so painful. And this is why I'm in therapy. You know, I need and want to embrace this, but it becomes so clear during sex of just how different I view it and how I experience it. Because I can look at Skylar and know without a shadow of a doubt that he is totally experiencing it in a different way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I will say, as the allosexual, when you are in these moments with your asexual partner and there is a breakdown of some sort, the way that you react to it is going to go far.
It's crucial.
Either
Honestly, it's crucial.
either negative or positive. And we'll actually talk about triggers in the next episode. But I was calm. I was respectful. I was asking like, do you need me to, remove myself from the situation and be next to you? And she said, nope, just stay where you're at.
Yeah.
I said, would you like to be done? And
it was just attentiveness and thoughtfulness and caring. And that's what I feel is exactly what's needed. Like there needs to be this understanding.
Yeah.
And as a matter of fact, I ended up having a little bit more of a breakdown after the whole thing. We were sitting there in the kitchen and I just thought, oh my gosh, like here I am having Skylar react in this damn near perfect way. And I can't even imagine what it would be like to be asexual and have a partner that gets angry or upset or annoyed when you're having this breakdown and they're like, oh my gosh, seriously, again? Or something like that. That feels like knives. That feels so painful to think that that is even happening to a fellow asexual. Because I don't even know what I would do.
Well, because I've had reactions, which again we'll talk in the next episode. I've had reactions to other things that were not probably great.
Right. Yep.
And so if I didn't have the sensitivity and the wherewithal to not be sensitive during the most vulnerable thing that my partner could be doing, there's possibility that it would not recover.
I don't think it would. I honestly don't think it would. So, and I'm having a hard time keeping it together right now. My eyes keep watering. My voice is shaky. I don't know if you can hear it when you're listening, but I also don't get this emotional that often. So this is a very new world for me, having these little mini panic attacks and talking about something that really gets me choked up. So my fears, I would say at a base level are that I'm not going to be good enough, and at some point, Skylar's going to wake up and he's going to say, well, I'm done with this. I can't do this anymore. And it's not right now. I don't have the fear right now. It's the fear that in 5 years from now, Skylar's going to have some interaction with somebody somewhere. And I think we all know to a certain level, pretty much, when you can feel a tension or a spark. And for me, since I'm asexual, it's not a sexual tension necessarily. It's like a romantic tension. And I think of Skylar having this interaction with someone randomly that happens to be very cute. And he feels that spark, that desire, and it's reciprocated, and bam, like his Sahara Desert is lit. And it's like, he's going to come home and he's going to tell me, I actually need this. So it's not right now that I'm scared of. It's 5 years from now. And then, another thing I've noticed with these fears, what my brain has started to do when we're out and around other people, is I start scoping the situation a little bit. Like, is that someone that would spark his interest? And I play this story out in my head, and I'm trying not to. I don't want to have these thoughts. I hate them. They're terrible.
She's doing like this mental wingman stuff.
I am. It's like I'm trying to prepare myself because society tells me that there's no way that this isn't going to happen. And all at the same time, I'm trying to trust Skylar and what he's saying. But it's so hard when you feel like you have the weight of the world coming at you and the statistics are not in your favor. But I have to choose to just say, fuck off, pretty much, to those. And recognize them, yes, and tell Skylar when it's happening, and then try to move through it. And my fears are just feeding his fear. That's what's so sad. So Skylar, I want you to tell them what your deepest fear is now. That it's not a lack of sex. It's now what?
My deepest fear, which I think I mentioned a little bit earlier, is that she will self-sabotage and that she will say, I can't do this anymore. I am feeling like I'm keeping you from being who you're supposed to be at your core, your desires, and I need to set you free, so I am done with our relationship.
Right. And I get it. Unfortunately, I get it. I get that fear because I am constantly worrying about this thing. And that's part of the big compromise that an asexual is making in an allo-ace relationship, is the constant just mental gymnastics and fear of what could happen next because you aren't enough.
And so it's interesting because both of our fears are not self-feeding. They're actually selfless. Because my fear is not that I'm not going to have sex ever again. My fear is that she is going to leave me.
Right. And my fear is that I will be holding you back and I can't live with that. So I have to set you free. And we had that aha today, didn't we?
Yeah.
And it was like, whoa, that's crazy. That's crazy.
There's a lot of people in relationships, not even just allo-ace relationships, but relationships generally speaking, where they talk about, why should I have to bend for my partner? Why should I have to go without? And there's this almost like I'm sacrificing everything. I'm the one who's sacrificing. But the reality is that is still self-serving. You become a martyr not because of the greater good, but you become a martyr because of the self-preservation or the self-service. So I've looked at it like I am not sacrificing sex. I don't see it like that at all. I don't see that my quote unquote sacrifice of sex is an actual sacrifice. Because people have asked, like, why is it fair that you are giving up what you need or want or desire? And that's Jesse's fear, right? Is that I'm giving up my desires for her and she feels guilty for that.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't see it that way. I see as that I am not giving up that, but I am meeting her where she is feeling the safest and where with her boundaries we can create meaningful connections, which we say a lot, but it's true. The connections that we have are meaningful. And so me not having sex for 3 months or for 3 years or for 30 years doesn't matter to me at all, because I've given up having a self-serving sacrifice and martyrdom. And I'm not saying that people need to give that up, but you have your relationship and you have the things that you're willing to and not willing to do. And if you're not willing to not have sex with an asexual who is averse to sex
Or repulsed by
or
sex.
repulsed by sex,
Yeah.
or if it's not enough, then you're never going to be happy.
You're never, even if the asexual was willing to do this for you, you still will end up not feeling like it's enough because you know that they're not in it, in quotations.
We have seen between Reddit and Instagram and TikTok and Facebook groups where people, you know, they approach the asexual person with an ultimatum, if you will, and they end up coming to a agreement of like, well, okay, I'm okay with scheduled sex once a week on Wednesday night. And then it happens for a little bit, and then the person says, it was fine for a little while, but then it felt like
you weren't in it.
You weren't in it. And so there's this expectation for someone who is compromising and giving you what you asked for, but really it never was the sex that you were wanting. It was being desired. It was that sexual desire that you were really hoping for and them enjoying it. And now that they're not, it's no longer something you want to do. I know that Jesse doesn't sexually desire or want me.
But you also know that I do desire you in every other way.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I have no feelings of like expectations or for her to like pretend to like it, because I know that she does not desire me sexually at all.
Right. I honestly feel like I had a huge turning point today when you looked me in the eyes and told me that you look at sex as intimacy the same way that you look at holding hands with me, making food with me in the kitchen, going on walks with me, tickling my back. And so then at that point I was like, oh, so it really did. This really means that you actually, it's okay because all these other things are fulfilling to you in an intimate way.
Because
when you leveled that playing field and took away the hierarchy with it, that is key, probably. Honestly, I feel like that's key. If you can take the hierarchy away from that and make it level playing field.
And there's probably, you know, if you're wanting to stay in a relationship with an asexual partner, who is sex averse, sex repulse, you have to do some self-discovery. Like, if you both aren't wanting ethical non-monogamy, like it's a mutual decision that you both want to do, because there are some asexual people out there that are like, please go do that with someone else. I don't want it. Leave me alone. Go do that, and we can, Netflix and cake.
Mm-hmm.
And if you both want to do that, that is amazing. That is great for you.
You should never assume, though, that an asexual is just going to be okay with ethical non-monogamy just because they're not wanting to do that with you.
And you actually see a lot of that toxic stuff in the Dead Bedroom subreddit.
Oof, the Dead Bedroom subreddit is a dangerous place. Ooh.
There's people that are literally giving this suggestion. Well, when you got married to me, you said that you would provide sex, this, and this. You're no longer providing sex. So that means that I'm going to get it somewhere else. Unless you start providing it. That's never going to turn out the way that you think it's going to turn out.
No.
So there is a lot on both ends, on the asexual partner and the allosexual partner. There is a lot of self-healing and self-work and self-love and therapy and understanding and empathy and sensitivity that has to happen. And there are some people that can't do it. And I'm not suggesting that it's easy. I'm not suggesting that it's perfect.
But at least be curious to what could be possible. Be curious to it. Be curious in the different ways that you can build these connections that respect one another, that respect boundaries that need to be respected.
Because we talked about this, I believe, in episode 3, where my boundaries are not the same as Jesse's boundaries. An allosexual who is hoping to have a lot of sex with their partner, that's not a boundary. That's a hope. That's a request.
Yeah.
A boundary is something that you have in place to make you feel safe. It's not a request or a hope. It's something that is cemented for your ability to feel safe and to have a meaningful connection. And your asexual partner is most likely, if you sit down and you can have these discussions, are going to have boundaries.
And if you feel like you can't respect your partner's boundaries, then that's an indicator of what needs to be happening next.
Because boundaries are not meant to be questioned or pushed against. They're actually supposed to be maybe clarified.
Yeah, I can see that.
So, for instance, if Jesse says, I don't want you to touch me sexually, I can ask clarifying questions. What does sexual touch mean to you? And she can clarify.
Right.
And then if I feel like there's an option in there that she didn't list, I can say, you didn't mention me touching your chest. Do you consider that type of touch okay? And if she says, I didn't think of that, thanks for bringing that up, that is also a touch that I would prefer didn't happen. Then I can go, okay, what about, touching your earlobe sensually? Or touching your...
That's so weird. Instantly when you just said that, I got so uncomfortable.
Or what about touching your clavicle? If we want to be scientific. So boundaries are not supposed to be like, well, you need to push their boundaries. Like, you're not willing to have sex? Well, why not? I think you just need to get over it and, learn to find ways to like sex with me because I'm your partner.
Yeah.
Like it's not good.
Yeah. And I know we just went on a little mini tangent on boundaries again, but it's just so important.
Well, but a lot of these things tie into the fears because if I'm pushing your boundaries, then it's going to feed into your fear that you're not good enough and that
definitely
I need to go find someone else and not be with you.
I mean, they all tie together. When we talk about triggers, guess what?
Yeah, same thing.
Feeds right into all of the other stuff too.
I am not trying to say that I am better than other allosexual partners. I'm not saying that I'm some saint and some perfect thing, but
do you feel released from this though? I honestly, I looked at Skylar and I was like, wait, does this feel like a huge weight off of your shoulders to not feel so scared of a lack of never having sex again or a lack of not having enough sex?
Well, yeah, because I would have these thoughts of like, oh man, it's been 3 weeks. Now it's been 4 weeks. Now it's been 6 weeks before.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And it's like, I don't care.
There was so much energy put onto that.
Yeah.
I think from my perspective with you, it almost seems like you know what it's like to be in the thick of it. For 18 years, you were in the thick of that mindset. You know what it's like. And now you're on the other side of it in a really, I would say, healthy way. And you have hope for other allosexuals out there dealing with this pain and this fear. Yeah. And you just want to shed light on it to maybe possibly make it a little bit easier on them. Give them anything you can.
Yeah, like if you can just find a way to not tie this into it, if you can just find a way to have other connections with your partner, if you can find ways to talk about their boundaries and respect them, if you can do all these things, then there's a possibility. Like we talked about this last time. Y'all fell in love at some point.
You did. You fell in love.
So can you fall in love again?
For all of the reasons that made you want to be around this person, spend all the time with them.
And I think we're going to do an episode probably called Starting Over. And I think we're going to have like ways to try to get to that point. But we know that there is a lot of hurt on the allosexual side. We know that there are a lot of women even who just feel so sexually undesired by their partner.
Mm-hmm.
There's certainly a lot of men who are feeling sexually undesired by their partner. There's non-binary people. There's the whole spectrum of people who are feeling
undesired,
such a hurt and such a pain.
Right.
But on the other side of the aisle is your asexual partner who is feeling just the same amount of pain and hurt.
And who loves you and sees all of the amazing things about you outside of sex.
Your partner on both sides of the aisle are wanting to classify intimacy as some tangible definition between you. But until you get together and talk about what that looks like for each person and see if some of those keywords match, then you're not going to be able to build on that foundation of what that intimacy looks like on a foundational level. Because one might be saying, I want my partner to give me physical touch without expectations of sex. And on the other side, they're saying, I want sex. But they also want to be touched in a non-sexual way. They also want to have their partner cuddle them. So you might both want physical touch, but you need to have that boundary that it's not going to lead to some kind of expectation. So find the foundational keywords that match in your list of what is considered intimate items.
Yeah, it's crazy because I actually think I'm pretty confident in these relationships that you are so much more on the same page than you realize, but sex is getting in the way of being on that same page.
So can you communicate that with your partner and figure out which keywords you have in common and see if you might be able to use that to connect this week.
Yeah. And with that being said, we understand that there are so many other things that come up in these relationships, but we really do feel like this whole big sex thing is the biggest thing that gets brought up. And so that's why we want that's why we dive into that so much. Wrapping this episode up, your fears are valid on both sides.
Yeah.
They're valid. The biggest thing that you can do for yourself is talk them out. Talk through them, communicate with your partner with what your fears are. And I know that's scary. I know it's so scary. But if you keep hiding your fears in shameful feelings, they'll just keep getting bigger and bigger and bigger until boom, you have no idea what to do with them any longer. And then everything is just chaos.
I've even seen some posts recently on Reddit where this person is saying, I broke up with my partner because they were asexual, and now looking back, I wish I wouldn't have done that.
Why?
Because they could have handled it better, the way that they reacted or the way that they understood asexuality. They could have gone back and changed the way that they communicated in that partnership and understood their partner more.
Yeah. I mean, I might be biased here, but I kind of feel like an asexual is capable of giving you the deepest, most genuine type of love that you could have for a long-term situation. The best companion. That's what I would say. But I mean, I'm asexual, so,
One final call of action, if you've made it this far. If this podcast has done anything for you, even if it's sparked a conversation between you and your partner, or if it has made you realize anything about your own journey when it comes to asexuality, if you can please take 30 seconds to leave a review on Spotify, Apple, wherever you're listening, as well as rank it, that would be amazing.
Right.
It'll do a lot for this podcast to be seen by other people who might be in these similar situations.
Yes, that's exactly what we want. And of course, liking, commenting, sharing the podcast, interacting with us on social, it goes so far. And we would love it if you would do that and interact with us.
Yeah. So name your fears, talk about your fears. And next time we'll talk about triggers.
That's going to be a wild ride.
See you guys.
See you.